Padre Pio, he denied absolution to a couple who had come all the way from upstate New York, specifically to confess to him, the husband and wife. They had traveled for hours, waited in line for days, and when they finally entered the confessional, the saint of San Giovanni Rotondo, he said something that shocked them to their core. He told them that he saw their marriage as a house built on shifting sands, a beautiful house on the outside, but with foundations that were on the verge of collapse. And the reason was something that most modern couples consider perfectly normal. They had built their entire relationship on pleasure. Now, you might be thinking that this is an exaggeration, that pleasure is a natural and healthy part of marriage, that God created pleasure to be enjoyed between husband and wife. And you would be partially right. But Padre Pio, he saw something that our eyes cannot see. He saw the spiritual consequences of when pleasure becomes the foundation, instead of just being one part of the whole. And in the next few minutes, you're going to discover what really happens to marriages that are built solely on that foundation. And more importantly, you're going to understand how to prevent your marriage from following the same path. This couple from upstate New York, their names were Robert and Jennifer. They had met at a party, felt an immediate physical attraction, and within a few months, they were married. The chemistry between them, it was intense. All their friends envied the passion that they displayed for one another. It seemed like the perfect marriage. But when they entered Padre Pio's confessional back in 1957, the story they told was very different. After 8 years of marriage, the passion had cooled. And when the passion faded, they discovered that they had nothing left. No friendship, no mutual respect, no shared goals, no faith. They had only memories of passionate nights that now seemed empty. Padre Pio listened to their confession in silence, and then he said something that Robert, he never forgot. You have built your house upon the flesh, and the flesh, it ages. The flesh, it tires. The flesh, it decays. What will you do when the flesh is no longer enough to hold you together? Jennifer, she began to cry. She knew that Padre Pio was right. In recent years, she had started to look at other men, not because she didn't love Robert, but because the foundation of their relationship was physical attraction. And physical attraction, it naturally seeks novelty. Robert, he knew it too. He had started to work more and more, coming home later and later, because being home meant facing the emptiness that existed between them when they weren't being intimate. Padre Pio then revealed what he was seeing in the spiritual world, and it was this revelation that made the couple understand the gravity of their situation. He said that he saw their marriage as a rope unraveling thread by thread, and each thread that broke represented a dimension of true love that they had never developed. Friendship was one thread, respect was another, praying together was another, mutual sacrifice was another, openness to life was another. All of these threads, they should be interwoven to form a strong rope. But in Robert and Jennifer's marriage, almost all of these threads were missing or broken. Only the thread of pleasure remained. And a single thread, no matter how thick it is, it cannot sustain the weight of a lifetime together. Padre Pio, he went even further. He said that he saw demons around that marriage, not generic demons, but specific demons that specialize in destroying marriages. And these demons, they were waiting patiently, waiting for the moment when the last thread would break. And when that moment arrived, Padre Pio warned the fall would be terrible. This wasn't just a simple metaphor. Padre Pio, he really saw these things. For decades, he carried the stigmata of Christ, and he received supernatural gifts of discernment. He could see the state of souls. He could see the unconfessed sins. He could see the demons that tormented people, and when he looked at marriages built only on pleasure, he saw imminent destruction. But why does this happen? Why can pleasure, which is a gift from God, become so destructive when it becomes the basis of marriage? Padre Pio explained it using a simple analogy. Fire, it's good. Fire, it warms, it illuminates, it cooks food. But fire, it needs to be contained in an appropriate place. A fireplace, a stove, a controlled campfire. When the fire escapes its place, it becomes destructive. It burns the house, it burns the forest, it burns lives. Pleasure, it's like fire. It's good and necessary when it's in its proper place, when it's part of a marriage built on true love, respect, friendship, shared faith, mutual sacrifice. But when pleasure escapes its place and becomes the primary reason for the marriage, it begins to consume everything around it. Padre Pio, he saw this constantly in his confessional. Couples who had married for passion and were now destroyed. Men who had sought other women because their wives no longer satisfied their desires. Women who had become bitter because their husbands only saw them as objects of pleasure. And the most tragic thing, children who grew up in homes where there was no true love, only the performance of a marriage that had lost its meaning. The Church has always taught that marriage has two primary ends. The first is the procreation and education of children. The second is the mutual good of the spouses. Pleasure, it's included in the second end, but it's not the second end itself. It's just a part of it. When pleasure becomes the primary end, when the couple exists primarily to give pleasure to one another, something fundamental is lost. The marriage ceases to be a vocation, and it becomes a contract of mutual satisfaction. And contracts, they can be rescinded when one of the parties is no longer satisfied. Padre Pio warned that this mentality of a contract, it was exactly what the devil wanted, because a marriage seen as a contract can be undone. But a marriage seen as a vocation, as a sacrament, as a divine calling, it has a strength that transcends the highs and lows of human passion. Robert and Jennifer, they heard all of this in silence, and then Padre Pio, he did something unexpected. He did not absolve them immediately. Instead, he gave them a penance that would last for months. First, they should spend 40 days without physical intimacy, not as a punishment, but as a way to rediscover other dimensions of their relationship. Padre Pio said that when pleasure is removed temporarily, the couple is forced to find other forms of connection, to talk, to pray together, to serve one another, to simply be present. Second, they should pray the rosary together every night. Padre Pio said that couples who pray together and stay together, it wasn't just a pious saying, it was a spiritual reality. Joint prayer, it creates bonds that pleasure alone could never create. Third, they needed to make a general confession, not just of their recent sins, but of their entire lives. Padre Pio wanted them to start from scratch, to rebuild their marriage on completely new foundations. And fourth, they should renew their marriage vows in a special mass, explicitly consecrating their marriage to the Holy Family. Rob and Emily followed all of these instructions, and something extraordinary happened. During those 40 days without physical intimacy, they discovered things about each other that they had never realized in 8 years of marriage. They uncovered fears, dreams, wounds from the past, hopes for the future. They discovered that they barely knew each other. Physical intimacy had been a way to avoid real intimacy, a way to connect superficially, without having to face the hard work of building a true union of souls. When the 40 days were up, when they returned to intimacy, everything was different. It wasn't just pleasure anymore. It was an expression of something much greater. It was the physical consummation of a union that now existed on multiple levels. Years later, Rob returned to San Giovanni Rotondo to thank Padre Pio. His marriage had been completely transformed. He said that before, he and Emily were just two bodies meeting. Now, they were two souls, completing each other. Padre Pio smiled and said something that Rob treasured forever. Pleasure is a wonderful servant, but a terrible master. When it serves love, it embellishes it. When it governs marriage, it destroys it. But not all the couples who came to Padre Pio had happy endings. There were those who heard the warning but refused to change. There was a man from Boston who came alone to confess. His wife had refused to accompany him. He confessed to Padre Pio that his marriage was in ruins. After 15 years, he and his wife barely spoke. They slept in separate rooms. The only thing keeping them together was their children. Padre Pio asked how the marriage had started, and the man admitted that he had married mostly because he couldn't resist the physical attraction he felt for his wife. She was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen, and he needed to have her. Needed. That one word revealed everything. Padre Pio explained that he had never really loved his wife. He had desired her, he had coveted her, he had possessed her. But true love is not possession. True love is a gift. It's wanting the good of the other more than your own good. The man became irritated. He said that he had given his wife everything: a house, cars, jewelry, vacations. What more could she want? Padre Pio responded with a question. Have you ever asked her what she wants? Do you know her dreams, her fears, her wounds, or do you only know her body? The man didn't know how to answer. Padre Pio then said something that the man considered too harsh. He said that he had treated his wife like an object from the beginning, and objects eventually lose their novelty. They lose their luster. They are replaced by newer and brighter objects. If you want to save your marriage, Padre Pio said, you need to start seeing your wife as a person, as a soul, as a daughter of God, not as a source of pleasure. The man stormed out of the confessional, outraged. He had come seeking absolution and comfort, not such harsh criticism. He considered Padre Pio an old-fashioned priest who didn't understand modern marriages. 3 years later, his wife filed for divorce. She had found another man, a man who, according to her, saw her as a person and not as a trophy. And the most tragic thing of all, the children were divided between two broken homes. Padre Pio wept when he saw cases like this, not out of judgment, but out of compassion. He saw the suffering that could have been avoided. He saw the children who would pay the price for their parents' mistakes. He saw the souls that would be lost along the way. Listen closely, because there's an even deeper aspect to this issue that we need to understand. Padre Pio taught that pleasure in marriage is not just physical. There's a hierarchy of pleasures. And when that hierarchy is inverted, everything becomes unbalanced. At the top of the hierarchy should be spiritual pleasure, the joy of sharing faith, the satisfaction of praying together, the peace of knowing that you're walking towards heaven together. Below that comes emotional pleasure, the happiness of being friends, the comfort of being confidants, the security of being allies in the face of life's difficulties. Below that comes intellectual pleasure, the stimulation of talking about ideas, the growth of learning together, the mutual admiration for the qualities of each other's minds. And finally, at the base comes physical pleasure. Important, necessary, blessed by God, but at the base, supported by all the other levels above it. When this hierarchy is correct, the marriage is stable. When one level weakens, the others compensate. When physical pleasure diminishes with age or illness, the couple still has friendship, shared faith, and emotional intimacy to sustain them. But when the hierarchy is inverted, when physical pleasure is at the top and everything else is secondary, the marriage becomes extremely fragile. Any problem in the physical sphere threatens to topple everything. Padre Pio saw this clearly. Couples where the husband had health problems and the wife felt betrayed because the pleasure diminished. Couples where the wife aged and the husband lost interest because he only saw physical beauty in her. Couples who entered a crisis when the children were born because intimacy became less frequent. All these problems had the same root, an inverted hierarchy of pleasures. And the devil knows exactly how to exploit this weakness. Padre Pio warned that there are specific demons that attack marriages. Demons of lust, of course, but also demons of boredom, demons of comparison, demons of perpetual dissatisfaction. These demons whisper thoughts like, "You deserve more. Your wife isn't as attractive as she used to be. That co-worker seems much more interesting. If you're not happy, you have the right to seek happiness elsewhere." And marriages built on pleasure are terribly vulnerable to these whispers, because when pleasure is the foundation, any promise of greater pleasure becomes an existential threat to the marriage. Padre Pio knew countless cases of adultery that started exactly like this, not with big sins, but with small comparisons, small dissatisfactions, small fantasies that were nurtured until they became actions. And when he questioned adulterers in confession, he almost always found the same pattern: marriages where pleasure was central, where the spiritual connection was absent, where true friendship had never been developed. "No one betrays a best friend," Padre Pio would say, "but far too many will betray a partner for mere fleeting pleasure when another person appears who seems to offer even greater thrills." That's a hard truth, but it's necessary. And Padre Pio was never afraid of hard truths. Padre Pio also revealed something about the sacrament of marriage that too few couples truly understand. Marriage isn't just a social contract or a celebration of love. It's a conduit of grace, a sacrament that confers very specific graces for the challenges of married life. When a couple gets married in the church, they receive graces for faithfulness, graces for patience, graces for forgiveness, graces to resist temptations, graces to raise their children in the faith. These graces are real, substantial, and effective. But there's a condition. For those graces to flow freely, the couple has to be in a state of grace themselves. They need to live an active sacramental life. They need to go to confession and communion. They need to keep open that channel through which grace flows. When a couple builds their marriage solely on pleasure, they very often neglect that sacramental dimension. Mass becomes something occasional. Confession, a distant memory. Prayer, a forgotten habit. And when that happens, Padre Pio warned, the channel of grace becomes obstructed. The couple is left alone, struggling with their own strength against temptations that are stronger than they are. Padre Pio compared it to a soldier going into battle without any weapons. He might have the best intentions, the firmest determination, but without the right arms, he will be defeated. The graces of the sacrament of marriage are the weapons that God gives to couples. To neglect them is spiritual madness. There was a woman who came to Padre Pio in desperation. Her husband had cheated on her. She couldn't understand how it had happened. They had loved each other so much in the beginning. The passion was so intense. Padre Pio listened patiently, and then asked a question that the woman wasn't expecting at all. How often do you attend Mass together? The woman admitted that they practically never went. They were Catholics, yes, but not practicing ones. Religion was something from their childhood, not their adult life. And how often did you pray together? Never. And how often did you go to confession? She didn't remember the last time. Padre Pio then explained with infinite compassion, but also with firmness. You were married in the church. You received enormous graces that day. Graces that could have protected your marriage, but you left those graces unused. You left the channel obstructed. You tried to live a Christian marriage with just human strength, and human strength is never enough against the temptations of the devil. The woman wept, not out of anger towards her husband, but out of repentance for all the years that they had neglected their faith. Padre Pio then consoled her. There is still hope. It's never too late to open the channel of grace again, to resume a sacramental life, to ask God to restore what has been broken, but this requires humility. It requires recognizing that you've made wrong choices. It requires starting again. This woman followed Padre Pio's advice. She went back to attending Mass. She went back to confession. She started praying for her husband, even though he was still distant, and something extraordinary happened. Little by little, her husband began to change, not through her pressure, but by a mysterious attraction that he couldn't explain. He began to miss something that he couldn't quite name. Months later, he also returned to the church. He confessed his sin. He asked his wife for forgiveness, and together they began to rebuild their marriage on completely new foundations. Padre Pio said that stories like this were common in his ministry. Marriages that seemed dead being resurrected by the grace of God, but the condition was always the same. Someone needed to take the first step of faith. Someone needed to open up the channel of grace again. There's yet another crucial aspect that Padre Pio revealed about marriages built on pleasure. He spoke about what happens to the children of these marriages. Children are extremely perceptive. They may not understand intellectually what's happening between their parents, but they feel it at the deepest level. They feel when their parents are true friends, or just partners of convenience. They feel when there's real love, or just a performance of marriage. And when they grow up in homes where pleasure is the foundation, they absorb that mentality. They learn that relationships are about personal satisfaction, that the other person exists to make me happy, that if I'm not happy, I have the right to seek happiness somewhere else. Padre Pio saw this propagating through the generations. Parents who married for passion and separated when the passion was gone. Children who repeated the same pattern. Grandchildren who considered marriage something temporary by definition. An epidemic of broken hearts, he called it, and it all began with an inversion of values, with pleasure occupying the place of true love. But Padre Pio also offered hope. He said that it's never too late to rebuild a marriage on the correct foundations. Even marriages that seem completely destroyed can be saved if both spouses are willing to do the necessary work. And that work begins with a shift in mentality. From seeing the other person as a source of pleasure to seeing the other person as an immortal soul. From asking what he or she can give me to asking what I can give to him or her. From seeking my own satisfaction to seeking the good of the other. Padre Pio taught that this shift in mentality is, in reality, a conversion from selfishness to true love. And like every conversion, it requires divine grace. That's why he insisted so much on prayer together. Couples who pray together open their souls to God's transforming grace. They allow him to do what they cannot do alone. They allow him to transform passion into love, desire into self-giving, possession into communion. The rosary was especially recommended by Padre Pio for couples in crisis. He said that Mary had a special interest in marriages. She had lived a perfect marriage with St. Joseph. She knew the challenges and the blessings of married life. and she was always ready to intercede for couples who asked for her help. Padre Pio told of a couple who were on the verge of divorce. They had already hired lawyers. They had already divided their assets. All that was left was to sign the papers. But before finalizing it, the wife had a dream. In that dream, Our Lady appeared and said just one thing: pray the rosary together for 30 days. The wife told her husband he was skeptical, but agreed to try. After all, what did they have to lose? During the first few days, it was awkward. They barely looked at each other while praying. The words came out mechanical, without devotion. But Padre Pio said that didn't matter. The important thing was to persevere. In the second week, something began to change. They began to feel a strange peace during the prayer, a gentleness that didn't exist at any other time of the day. In the third week, they began to talk after saying the rosary together, about things they hadn't discussed in years, about wounds that had never been healed, about mistakes that had never been forgiven. On the 30th day, they tore up the divorce papers. This couple visited Padre Pio years later to thank him, and he said something that surprised them. He said that it wasn't the prayer itself that saved their marriage. It was their willingness to pray together, the willingness to stand side by side before God, the willingness to admit they needed help. Prayer was the vehicle. Humility was the engine. And that's a crucial lesson for any couple. Pride is the greatest destroyer of marriages. The pride that says, I'm right, you're wrong. The pride that refuses to ask for forgiveness. The pride that prefers to be right than to have peace. Padre Pio saw pride in almost every marriage in crisis that came to him, and he was relentless in confronting it. It didn't matter who was right. What mattered was who was willing to yield first, who was willing to love first, who was willing to forgive first, and when neither was willing, the marriage was doomed. But when at least one was willing, there was hope, because the humility of one can awaken the humility of the other. The love of one can rekindle the love of the other. The forgiveness of one can open the door for the forgiveness of the other. Padre Pio used to say that in every marriage, someone needs to be the first to die to themselves, and that death to self is the seed of the resurrection of the marriage. There's also a practical aspect that Padre Pio emphasized. He said that couples need to deliberately cultivate the non-physical dimensions of their relationship. It's not enough to have good intentions. You need to have a strategy. He recommended that couples dedicate specific time to each dimension of their relationship. Time to talk like friends, without talking about kids, bills, or problems. Time to pray together, even if it's just for 5 minutes a day. Time to serve one another in small ways, without expecting anything in return. And he warned against the common mistake of thinking that these things happen naturally. They don't, especially after the honeymoon phase of marriage passes, especially after the kids arrive, especially after the routine sets in. Strong marriages are built intentionally, Padre Pio taught. Just as a house needs constant maintenance, a marriage needs constant investment. And the most important investment isn't in physical pleasure, which tends to happen naturally, but in the other dimensions that tend to be neglected. Padre Pio also talked about the importance of seeking help when needed. He wasn't ashamed to refer couples to other priests, to specialized confessors, to couples retreats. He knew that not all problems could be solved in a single confession, and he warned against the pride of thinking we can solve everything on our own. Some wounds are too deep, some patterns are too ingrained, some crises are too complex. In these cases, seeking help isn't weakness, it's wisdom. You've just discovered transformative truths about marriage, truths that Padre Pio shared with hundreds of couples over decades of ministry, truths that saved marriages that seemed lost. Each video like this requires hours of research, going through the archives in San Giovanni Rotondo, going through the testimonies of couples who were transformed, going through the letters and guidance that Padre Pio left behind. It's a work of bringing to light wisdom that can change the course of entire families. If these truths have touched your heart, the Super Thanks button down below is a way for you to participate in this mission. It's not just financial support. It's you saying that marriages need this message, that families need this wisdom, that Padre Pio's vision of true love needs to reach more couples. When you click on that golden heart, you become an advocate for the marriages that God wants to see flourish. Now let me share what you can do today to strengthen your marriage or to build correct foundations if you're still single. Padre Pio left practical guidelines that still work today. First, honestly examine the foundations of your relationship. If you're married, ask yourself, if physical pleasure were removed completely, what would be left? If the answer is very little, it's time to start building other dimensions. Second, start praying with your spouse. It may seem strange at first, especially if you've never done it before, but Padre Pio guaranteed that this practice transforms marriages. Start with something simple, like an Our Father and a Hail Mary before going to bed. Over time, expand to a rosary or the Liturgy of the Hours. Third, cultivate friendship deliberately. Schedule weekly time to be together without kids, without work, without screens. Talk about dreams, fears, memories. Rediscover each other as people, not just as spouses. Fourth, practice small acts of service daily. Padre Pio said that true love manifests in actions, not in feelings. Make your spouse's coffee. Do a chore that's usually theirs. Leave a loving note. These little things build reservoirs of affection that sustain the marriage in difficult times. Fifth, confess regularly, both individually and about sins against the marriage. Confession brings specific graces for the marital state, graces of patience, of forgiveness, of purity, of fidelity. And sixth, consecrate your marriage to the Holy Family. Padre Pio recommended that couples do this consecration annually, renewing their commitment to live marriage according to the model of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. Padre Pio promised that couples who followed these guidelines would see transformation, not instant, like in a magic trick, but gradual, constant, lasting. Transformation that builds foundations that withstand any storm, because storms will come. Life is hard. Marriage is challenging. There will be moments when pleasure is scarce, when physical attraction diminishes, when bodies age, when illnesses arrive. And in those moments, what will sustain the marriage? If the answer is only pleasure, the marriage won't survive. But if the answer is friendship, shared faith, mutual respect, stories lived together, sacrifices offered for each other, then the marriage will not only survive, but flourish. The most beautiful marriages that Padre Pio knew weren't the most passionate. They were the deepest. Elderly couples who still looked at each other with tenderness, couples who had weathered crises and come out stronger, couples who had built something that no storm could destroy. And all these couples had one thing in common. They'd learned somewhere along the way that pleasure is a wonderful servant, but a terrible master. Padre Pio often spoke about a phenomenon he frequently observed. Couples who came to him in crisis were often going through what's called the 7-year itch, or the midlife crisis, or the empty nest syndrome when the kids leave home. All these crises, Padre Pio explained, have one thing in common. They expose the weaknesses in the foundation of the marriage. If the foundations are strong, the couple weathers the storm and comes out even more united. But if the foundations are weak, especially if they're built solely on pleasure, the crisis can be fatal. The 7-year itch is particularly revealing. It's the point at which the novelty of the marriage has completely worn off. The initial passion has cooled. The reality of everyday life has set in, and the couple needs to decide whether to build something deeper or seek novelty elsewhere. Couples who built their relationship on pleasure often fail at this crossroads because pleasure, by its very nature, seeks novelty. And after 7 years with the same person, the novelty is gone. But couples who built on friendship, shared faith, and true commitment discover something surprising. They discover that love can grow with time, that intimacy can deepen, that the best years of the marriage are yet to come. Padre Pio knew couples who had been together for 50, 60 years, and when he asked about their secret, the answer was always similar. They said that in the early years they loved each other with passion, but as time went on, they learned to love with intention. And love with intention is much stronger than love fueled by passion. Love fueled by passion depends on feelings, and feelings are inconstant. They come and go. They rise and fall. They cannot be the foundation of an entire life. Love with intention is a decision, a choice renewed every day. I choose to love you today, even when I don't feel like it. I choose to be faithful, even when temptation appears. I choose to forgive, even when you've hurt me. That's the love that Padre Pio saw in marriages that lasted. And that's the love he taught the couples who came seeking his guidance. Now, I need to hear from you. Team, marriage is more than just pleasure. Versus team, pleasure is also fundamental. Which one are you? And more importantly, how do you balance these two dimensions in your relationship? If you're married, tell us about the moment you realized you needed to invest in other dimensions besides the physical. Tell us about that discovery. Tell us what changed in your marriage. If you're single, tell us what you're looking for in a future marriage. Tell us what foundations you want to build. Tell us how this video changed your perspective. Your story might be exactly what another couple needs to hear. It might be the testimony that saves a marriage that's on the brink. Padre Pio said that strong marriages are the foundation of a healthy society, and strong marriages begin with correct decisions. Decisions about what really matters. Decisions about what will be the foundation. Pray, hope, and don't worry. Worry is useless. God is merciful and will hear your prayer. May Saint Padre Pio intercede for your marriage. May Our Lady cover your family with her mantle, and may every day, when you choose to love your spouse with true love, and not just with passion, the angels celebrate in heaven another victory of love over selfishness. The grace of God be with you and with your family. Amen.